Good evening, and welcome to a conversation about the Ontario Line project with a focus tonight on the West segment. My name is Joseph Thornley. I'm the CEO of 76 Engage, Metrolinx's public engagement partner for virtual consultation. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's event, and as such, I will work to keep the event on time, ensure your questions are answered as best as possible, and make sure as many questions are answered as possible. Now, one important note, this event is being closed captioned. So if you need closed captioning, just look at the bottom of the video screen that you're seeing right now, and you should see a CC. Click on that, and that will turn on closed captioning. As we begin tonight's event, let us take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers and immigrants in this generation or generations past. Metrolinx declares its commitment to building meaningful relationships with Indigenous people, and we acknowledge the historic and continued impacts of colonization and the need to work towards meaningful reconciliation with the original caretakers of this land. We acknowledge that Metrolinx operates on lands covered by 20 treaties, and that we have a responsibility to recognize and value the rights of Indigenous nations and peoples and conduct business in a manner that is built on a foundation of trust, respect, and collaboration. Also, just before we start, it's a tradition with Metrolinx to take a look at, to talk about safety at all times and on all things. It's fundamental to everything that Metrolinx does. So for today's safety moment, we want to highlight that face coverings and masks remain an important tool for preventing the spread of COVID-19. Here on the slide that you should be seeing on your screen, we've included some reminders about do's and don'ts when it comes to masks and face coverings. Please continue to follow public health advice and stay safe when you're out there. Now, this evening's discussion is one of a series of virtual events we're holding this month for all the Ontario Line station areas. Tonight, as I indicated, we'll be focusing on the West segment. That includes the Ontario Line stations at Exhibition, King and Bathurst, and Queen and Spadina. Tonight's presentation will also focus on the design principles and considerations that go into building an Ontario Line station. If you have questions about other segments of the Ontario Line, there are events coming up this month for which you can register and participate at that time. The Ontario North Line segment on September 16, East segment September 23, Downtown September 30th. And if you're interested in one of those, just click on the live meetings button at the top of your screen, and you can go there and find the registration for those events. We've scheduled tonight's session to last an hour and a half. There'll be a brief presentation, and then we'll take as many questions as possible. You'll find all of the resources you need to participate on the event page. You'll be able to see the presentation materials. Box has a copy of tonight's presentation that you can download and save to review later. There's also a place where many people have been submitting questions already. And in tonight's session, in order to answer as many questions as possible, we're going to start off by answering questions that are drawn from the pre-submitted written questions. Because we can only get to a limited number, if you see something there that reflects your interest, please take a second and vote it up. Because what we'll try and do is cover a mix of the most voted for questions and to also cover the topic area, the range of topics that have been asked for. So that'll be the first part of what we'll do in the question and answer. In the second part of the question and answer, we're going over to a Zoom room where those of you who want to actually raise your hand and ask a question directly to the project panel can be heard. You'll see a link immediately below the video on your screen that says call in with your question. And you can join that Zoom meeting room anytime between now and the second half of the question and answer session. And Gina Collymore and Kelly Thornton are there. They'll be your moderators there and help you to get lined up. As I said, the questions in the first half will be drawn to cover a range of areas and the most voted for. In the case of the Zoom room, it will be first people with their hand up will get to ask their first questions. So hopefully we'll get through a lot of material. We have a panel with us here tonight from Metrolinx, an expert panel. Richard Tucker is the Ontario Line Project Director. With him is Malcolm McKay, the sponsor for the Ontario Line Project. They're joined tonight by Celia Johnstone, who is the Regional Director and Transportation Architecture Principal at HDR. And we also have with us James Francis, a manager on our environmental programs and assessment team. Welcome, Richard, Malcolm, Celia. We're looking forward to a good and productive meeting. Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Joseph. I really appreciate the introduction, and we welcome everybody to tonight's session. Tonight, we're going to do a recap of some of the work that we've undertaken on the west segment of the Ontario Line. We're going to cover the timelines, Exhibition Station, King, Bathurst, Queen, and Spadina stations. And then, as Joseph had indicated, we're going to roll out the design principles that we're embracing as part of the Ontario Line, and then get into our question and answer period. Next slide. So tonight's presentation is going to be covering exhibition, which you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, up to King and Bathurst and over to Queen and Spadina Station, which is what we call the western segment of the Ontario Line. Next slide. So our timelines. Our timelines are coming up quickly. Later this year, we're actually going to be starting some early works at Exhibition Station. Early in 2022, we're going to be issuing the environmental assessment report and receive public feedback on that. Mid-2022, we're going to be awarding the two big contracts that are currently out for tender, which is the South Civil Stations and Tunnels contract and the ROSSM contract, which stands for Rail Stock Systems Operations and Maintenance. By 2023, we'll be constructing in the field. Next slide. Exhibition Station. This station is sited where the current exhibition station is along the GO corridor. It's situated very well to have an excellent transfer with the existing GO lines. It's also immediately adjacent to the TTC surface network. It also meets up with Exhibition as well as Ontario Place. And then to the north, easy walking distance within 10 minutes is the majority of Liberty Village. Next slide. Richard, can you cover the early works?
Hi, Malcolm. Thanks very much. Yeah, pleasure to look at the early work. So in front of the slide here, you see a lot of colors going on. Basically, the draft early works report was issued in the end of last year in 2020 and received final approval and issuance in February 2021. The tender for the early works was issued back in June of this year, and we've received the submissions, and they're currently undergoing evaluation. We expect to be able to start work on this in this area in October of this year, all things proceeding as planned. If you look at the early works themselves, you can see the overall map provides the context. Basically, most of the early works are located on the north side of the corridor. And in general terms, the early works are preparing the way for the creation of the combined GO Ontario Line station, and basically allowing room for a center platform in the GO tracks, so that all the tracks will have a platform. As part of this work, you can see that the railway lines, the two northern GO tracks, are moved to the north. And part of that work, so we have a new platform, we have the realignment of the train tracks, which are item D. We have the new platform, which is item C. That's a temporary platform to allow the construction of the final overhead concourse station. Item E is a overhead pedestrian bridge, which is designed to relieve some of the crowding that currently occurs in the tunnel that passes under the tracks and would be in place for about 10 years. And it will also allow pedestrians to pass over the construction traffic. They'll be moving east to west as the tunnel to the start of the launch shaft for the tunnel, which will be somewhat to the east of here by near Strawn Avenue. And then you can see item B is the new north entrance that will be being constructed on One Atlantic. One Atlantic is scheduled for demolition and would be one of the first pieces of work we'll be looking at. And also item A, which is one of the early works, one of the first part of the schedule as well, is to bring that existing unopened passage and elevator and head house back into operation. As to allow for that crossing of the railway corridor. Next slide, please. And here you can see an artist's rendering. Basically, you can see the overhead pedestrian bridge crossing the corridor from the left side is to the north and the right side is to the south with the Gardiner Expressway. Here you're looking along the railway corridor towards the downtown and the CN Tower you can see in the background there. And the pedestrian bridge crossing over the railway corridor. You can see the two, although it's not very distinct, but you can see the two new railway lines that have been moved slightly to the north to allow for the future center platform. And you can see the new platform and the new temporary platform where the train is currently parked. Also at exactly where the pedestrian bridge comes out, you can see on the left-hand side there, between those two big advertising signs, is a small head house, which is the new head house and elevator for the extension of the tunnel. With that, next slide, please. And I think that's over to Celia. Or is
Actually,
it back?
I'll take that, Richard.
Okay, sorry.
So this is King and Bathurst Station, and the two boxes that you see on the north and south side of King Street on the east side of Bathurst are where the entrances are going to be. During construction, we're going to be mining vertically down in those sites and then mining across under the street, called a sequential excavation method for the mining operation to build the station. We're doing this in order to make sure that the streetcar and surface transit networks and traffic remains open during the course of construction. Next slide. Similarly, at Queen and Spadina, we have two entrances, one on the southwest side of Spadina and one on the northeast side of Queen and Spadina. And once again, we're going to be using sequential excavation methods, SEM, to build this station and, again, minimize the impact to traffic in the community as a result of building this infrastructure. So now we're going to pass it over to Celia and a discussion about the design principles. Celia?
Yes. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, so we've established 5 primary design principles for the project. The first one being system reliability. This is important that it's first, we understand that primarily we're designing a transportation system, and it's important to everyone that it functions well and reliably, and the trains run on time. The second one is a passenger-focused design. So really, you know, after our first principle, really everything about the experience is really from the passenger's point of view. So the design of the project is really to make it a friendly and high quality experience for the passenger. And then thirdly, it's the public realm benefits and placemaking. the Ontario line is running through a lot of varied different neighborhoods in Toronto, and so all of them, all of the station locations need to be adapted to their public realm and act as a catalyst. Then context and integration, we need to integrate the station and the system into all of the different neighborhoods that we're traveling through. And ultimately, we want to have intuitive wayfinding. We want to design the system so it's easy to use, and it's able to, you're able to use it without a map, and really without signage. That all of the stations are designed in the same way, so it means that anybody can use them, even people who are tourists or unfamiliar with the system. Next slide, please. So just some of the key considerations is we have 3 types of stations. We have inline stations, pavilion stations, and interchange. So the inline stations, these are the stations that occur along the line. We have special stations that are interchange stations. These are the stations that interconnect with other services, like at exhibition. And then we have pavilion stations. There are a couple of locations along the line where we have a standalone entrance pavilion that are integrated into parkland. Next slide, please. So the things that integrate, that influence the size and shape of the station, we start with the passenger amenities. So we require elevators, barrier-free path of travel. It's the entry points and where they're located in the city, their proximity to other services, including drop-off points. We have service space that's integrated into the stations. We have vertical circulation elements, all of our stairs and escalators, as well as elevators. And then we have a public circulation space, and it's primarily the passenger path of travel that all the stations are designed around. And next slide, please. So system reliability, the things that we consider when we're designing is that we have durable, long-lasting materials, timeless materials. We are designing these stations for 100 years longer. We design to facilitate intermodal transit and connectivity. You know, one of the primary things that we do in the planning of these is to make sure that people's connections are as short as possible, that we're not sending people down long routes in order to accommodate. So we look very carefully at how to make the routes short as possible. We look at opportunities to integrate green infrastructure in the design of the system overall. And we design for ease of operation and access for maintenance. And the importance of that is a few things. It leads to reliability of the system, dependable, on time. It leads to efficiency, but also safety. You know, one of the reasons we design for maintainability is so important is that with minimal maintenance, very high quality materials, it means that the stations look good, and they can reliably look good for a long time. Next slide, please. So passenger-focused design. Underneath all of the engineering and design that goes into these stations and the systems that run the transit system, really the stations are designed for the people, and the primary importance of connecting the people with the vehicles or with the platforms. So they're designed to be accessible and safe for all transit users, regardless of ability. So we provide direct, short, safe, convenient connections for all passengers, but we're also designing for a range of disabilities, as well as it's meant to be as inclusive as possible. So we not only do we have elevators, redundant elevators, we also consider things such as partially sighted or designing with rest places, places for people who need to rest on their journey. And we're always looking to minimize vertical and horizontal distances that the passengers need to travel, and that the journey that they take is pleasant. Next slide, please. So part of passenger-focused design is that we have abundant circulation, that it's properly sized, that it can handle the crowding. We have elevators. We always have 2 elevators, redundant elevator paths into the stations. We have platform edge doors, and this protects the passenger environment, and it also provides a more pleasant environment inside the station, and cleaner, which gives you an environment on the platform which is better for people, and also helps with the efficiency of the system, that the trains can run, and then you pass through platform edge doors that just open when the train arrives. So you can see that we're showing a diagram here of an underground station. We start with a visible entrance. We travel down to a concourse, which is open and easy to navigate, and it takes you down then to the platform level. Of course, our stations also need to build in a lot of service area and other functions, but those are built in around the passenger journey, which is sort of our primary. Next slide, please. So here you can see we have a drop-off at the head house, and we consider every stage of the journey and what we need to do to remove the barriers when we're designing. So from the drop-off of the entrance, you need to recognize the transit system. All of our entrances are located in sort of primary locations, very visible. We let in as much natural light as we can. This helps with intuitive wayfinding. You can find your way out. You can see the daylight. We have logical vertical circulation paths, so that makes the journey easy. You can see your destination as much as possible. And that throughout, we're providing passenger amenities and real-time information. We provide designated waiting spaces on the platform and where the trains arrive. Next slide. So passenger-focused design for safety and accessibility. We're designing with multiple elevator paths, so that an elevator that's out of service doesn't affect the accessibility of the station. We have, so we have dual accessible paths from street to platform. We have, through information and through the design, we identify the accessible routes. The accessible routes are the same routes integrated with the main entrance. We consider space proofing just to make sure that those accessible routes have enough space to function. We have special signage. We have equipment, again, mounted at varying heights to make sure that we have the widest accessibility. We have platform edge tactile strips. This helps to indicate where the doors are and where the doors will be opening to give access to the trains. We have designated waiting areas and fully glazed station entrances. We're trying to design using lighting strategies to help with natural wayfinding and accessibility in the stations. Next slide, please. So public realm benefits. So the transit infrastructure is a key part of the public realm. When we build a subway station, it brings something to the neighborhood. It becomes a gateway to the rest of the city. But similarly, it brings the rest of the city to the neighborhood. So we have very high quality design standards and some thoughtful integration into each of the different neighborhoods. So we extend and support the public realm. We have some very high quality streetscape standards and different standards for the different locations to integrate the stations into the existing neighborhoods. And we're always considering the existing community and our design guidelines, making sure that the station is attractive and becomes an asset in the community. Next slide, please. So context and integration, we're always trying to integrate. There are slightly different strategies in different neighborhoods. Certainly in the downtown in the downtown west segment, we're trying to integrate into some existing neighborhoods. We are integrating some of our entrances into historic buildings which are being preserved, and we're integrating our stations into complete communities. So we have some of our entrances are integrated into these heritage buildings, but we also have a material palette and setting very high quality standards for the construction of the entrances, and materials which are sympathetic to the existing neighborhoods. Next slide, please. So intuitive wayfinding, this is sort of a fundamental theme for making a station easy to use, and easy to use for the widest range of people. So of course we have signage and so on, but really the stations are designed to work without needing to be reading signs. So we have transparent street-facing facades. We typically have the fare collection and the fare zones up at street level. It's very easy to see that our entrances are transit stations. We, as part of the intuitive wayfinding, we're also integrating street furniture, canopies, signage, and information, making sure that you can see the station from down the street. And we have a balance with intuitive wayfinding between things which are consistent system-wide. We want people to be able to use the different stations, but use them in the same way. So if you're stopping at an unfamiliar station, you don't need to learn the layout. They'll function, and the wayfinding will have the same cues. So, you know, a shirt has different cuff and collars, but the buttons are the same. Next slide, please. And then the station design. So we're setting, these buildings are built for a long time, so we have very high quality standards. We need that. They're very heavily used buildings. But we're setting sort of standards which have very, very high quality finishes and integration, for example, of terracotta to integrate into some heritage neighborhoods. We have very high quality glazing standards and materials. And again, fundamentally, this is so that our buildings look very good, and they look good for a long time. I think that's it. The next slide, I think, is over to Malcolm again. Oh, yes, sorry. And then, sorry, interior materials also. We use very hard-wearing materials, but part of the palette of materials for the Ontario line is that we also want some warmth. And so we're looking at a palette of materials that is very hard-wearing, but that gives a warm feeling. Next slide. I think that's to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, that is, Celia. Great job. Thank you so much. So what's next for us? We want to come out with regular updates and more virtual events, and you heard Joseph refer to some of those. This is an opportunity, and there's a continued opportunity for feedback and to ask questions. And as soon as we possibly can, and we're allowed to, we'll have safe in-person meetings and public events in place to be able to see you face to face. The exhibition early works construction begins in the fall of 2021, and then the impact assessment report is due January 2022, with the draft report that's open for public feedback and then will be incorporated with the final report issued in April 2022. Next slide. So your feedback is vital. There's multiple ways for you to reach out to us. You can contact us at our website at Ontario Line at metrolinx.com, or you can call us at 416-202-5100, or go to our website metrolinx.com/Ontario Line. Sign up for your regular EE newsletter and keep in touch with us. We're looking forward to continued engagement going forward, and I think we're now about to enter the question and answer session, so I'll send it back to Joseph.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Good presentation. I learned something more tonight, and that's what this is about. So we have about an hour for questions. As I said earlier, we're going to start off with the first set of questions coming from those that you've submitted previously and upvoted. And then we'll go over to Kelly Thornton in the Zoom room. And if people are there and want to be heard asking their question, we'll take those. So let's start off with some of the written questions. And the first question I'd like to send over to you is about short transfer connections. And it's an anonymous question. And the questioner asks, will the transfer connections between the Ontario Line and the streetcars, buses, community buses, and GO trains be short and easy to use by actual people? Many of the current stations on the Line 1 extension and the Eglinton Crosstown LRT have long walks between trains and connecting public transit vehicles. That discourages use, especially if people have walking problems like a broken leg after a skiing accident or anything else. So can you tell us a bit about the planning for the transfer connections and what people should be expecting in these three stations after this project has been developed?
Sure, Joseph, I can handle that. There's multiple transfer points at Exhibition, for instance. On the north side of the rail corridor, we're going to be building a new street called Liberty New Street. That will have bus stops on it that are immediately adjacent to the head house in order to get into the Ontario Line or the GO line. On the south side, we're working quite closely with the TTC for the streetcar connection. There's a plan that the TTC has is to extend the streetcar further west towards Dufferin Street. That will also provide immediate, easy transfers from the surface network. All of our other stations at King, Bathurst, and Queen and Spadina have entrances sited adjacent to or nearby the streetcar stops from the surface network. So those transfers can also happen quite easily. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, thank you for that, Malcolm. So looking at Exhibition, the Exhibition station, there's another question here, asphalt desert at Exhibition Stadium, or at Exhibition Station. Clearly the questioner is been looking at the announcement about the redevelopment of Ontario Place and is thinking about that. And the questioner is asking whether or not anything is being done about the current, what the questioner calls the asphalt desert that they have to travel across to get from Exhibition to Ontario Place. Does the Ontario Line project take that into account? Is there any planning for that journey?
Joseph, absolutely. We have a very active body of work right now that's looking at what we call the last mile. It's the distance between the Ontario Line Exhibition Station and Ontario Place. And we're working quite closely with the Exhibition Place Board of Governors and the City of Toronto to come up with solutions to transform that area into a very palatable and quite a nice transfer, either by walking or alternative means. So stay tuned for that one, but it is a very active body of work that we're looking at, and it's important to support the development plans for Ontario Place as well as the plans for exhibition grounds.
And just because you mentioned it, alternative means, any hint about what alternative means might be?
So we're looking at things like autonomous vehicles. We're looking at greenscapes along the way. We're looking at even higher order transit, a guideway across. We're looking at a gondola solution to go across. So there's a number of things that we're investigating right now, and we'll be coming back in very few months with the preferred design for this area that will have been discussed quite extensively with the city and the Exhibition Place Board of Governors.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a question about the tunnel, the portal. Where will it go into the ground in Exhibition at Exhibition Place? And the question is also, how far down will it go, and will it impinge upon Garrison Creek?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one, Joseph. Basically, the portal itself is located just to the west of Strawn, along the north side of the corridor, running parallel to the tracks there. And basically, after leaving the station at Exhibition, it runs gradually descends into the ground and is underground by the time it hits Strawn Avenue, and well underground by the time it's under the Garrison Common Park, Ordnance Park, and then it starts turning its way to the north and east as it heads up towards the King Bathurst station. Essentially, the Garrison Creek is a very historic creek through that area. I think it's mostly underground these days, and yes, we are well underneath that. So we go down to some basically 30 meters plus under the ground and into the bedrock. So we are well underneath that and well aware of the historic Garrison Creek alignment.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a question about the Ontario Line Loop, and Kevin has asked this question. And Kevin says the province's transportation plan makes mention of an Ontario Line Loop concept with no further mention of what it is. It's hard to give feedback on the Ontario Line knowing that there is a second phase being planned with which the public doesn't have any visibility yet. What is the Ontario Line Loop concept, and how will it impact the current Ontario Line? What are its goals? When can we see what it is?
So I can help you with that, Joseph. The Ontario Line has built into it at both of its ends the opportunity for extension. At the Northern Ontario Science Centre site, there's opportunities to extend further north to perhaps as far as the Shepherd Avenue subway to again provide further relief to Line 1. And then at Exhibition, we've made accommodation for further expansion west to be able to go as far out as perhaps Roncesvalles and north to tie into Line 2 there. So the plans are developed in such a way that extension and whatever that extension might be is accommodated for. Back to you, Joseph.
Okay, and has Metrolinx made any statement about when those plans, those contingencies might be triggered for people who are interested in them?
So we haven't. What we've done is we've accommodated for expansion. We don't have plans for expansion today.
Okay.
We have a very big subway program with the 4 projects that are being delivered over the course of the next 10 years. So we've got a pretty full plate right now.
Okay, thank you for that. A question about the station names. So there's one question about renaming King and Bathurst and Queen and Spadina. And the questioner has suggested Fashion District in place of King and Bathurst, and Alexandra Park in place of Queen and Spadina. And there's another question also, and I'll put it in this bigger context. Will there be an opportunity for the public to have some say in the station names, or are they already predetermined? So can you talk a bit about the station names, how they are arrived at, and whether the public will have some opportunity for input?
Yeah, absolutely. So the station names that are currently in place are what we call working names. There will be a full public consultation effort that goes forward in the naming of every station, and there will be opportunity for suggestions like those that have been made by the questioner to provide input for the decision-making process around the names. So that's another exciting, fun part of the program, as is the naming of the tunnel boring machines.
Okay, thank you. Liberty Village. When talking about the exhibition station, you pointed out its location relative to Liberty Village. There's a questioner here who is asking about the location and suggesting, from the questioner's perspective, that Exhibition Stadium is too far south to serve Liberty Village well, and puts the terminus in an uninhabited area. And he or she is asking whether or not it's worth the sacrifice having it there, and whether there's any alternative to the location that would put it closer to Liberty Village.
So Joseph, during our planning process, we create something called a walk shed. A walk shed is the area that's within 10 easy minutes of the subway station. With our walk shed, we capture a great deal of Liberty Village. But very importantly, we create an excellent transfer with the existing GO network. Our anticipation is that a large number of transfers will occur. Our modeling shows that at Exhibition Station, and that will provide relief to a very congested Union Station. So that's very important. As well, Exhibition Place and Ontario Place are destinations throughout the year that are supported by the siting of the Ontario Line station where it is, as well as the previous questioner who was asking about extension. Well, this is an ideal location for future extension of the Ontario Line. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk a bit about street closures? There's a question regarding the street closures. Will we see more closures on Queen, like Queen and Spadina? And how long are those streets likely to be closed?
Well, the good news there is that there's no planned total street closures other than the one that we've discussed at Queen and Yonge. The plans for King and Bathurst and Queen and Spadina are to do a form of building that does not impact the surface transit network or the streetcar network, and allows us to keep the lanes open. There'll be minor lane restrictions at these sites in order to access into the sites and exit the sites. But those are being developed in conjunction with the city's transportation services, as well as the TTC, to make sure that the impact is minimized.
Okay, thank you. Let's I have a question about the TTC. So could you clarify the future design of the exhibition station? From slide 8, I believe you had it there, how it will jive with the TTC's ongoing plan to extend the streetcar line west from Exhibition to connect to the Dufferin Gate Loop. And the questioner says that work has been in planning for years, but the proposed design shown here provides no indication of how it will align with that plan.
So I talked about this earlier, and so this is the south side of the exhibition station. We're working quite closely with the TTC on their plans for the extension. That streetcar extension is in design right now, so you know, the timing for development or building is imminent in the budgeting process for the TTC, and they will make that announcement. But we are very carefully coordinated with the TTC to make sure that we are, number one, not interfering with their expansion plans, and two, create a good seamless transfer opportunity for those vehicles that continue west past our main entrance.
Okay, thank you for that. And let's, I know that we're focusing tonight on the 3 western stations on the western segment. There's a question about capacity, and I think some people are always wondering what it will be like and how future-proofed the plans are. So the question is about capacity. The line's projected to have daily ridership of just under 400,000 people, 388,000, and will be using light metro technology. However, the Expo line in Vancouver had a daily ridership of about 290,000 people pre-COVID, and it was overcrowded, this person says, and operating near capacity. If the Ontario line is to use light metro technology similar to the Expo line and have about 98,000 more daily riders, wouldn't the line be at or near capacity? And the questioner acknowledges 90-second intervals. However, Expo in Vancouver is at 108 seconds. Will the extra capacity be through the greater frequency? Can you talk a bit about the capacity and your projections for this questioner, please?
Yeah. So the 90-second headways are key. Reliable transit is key, and all those things are built into the ROSM, the Rolling Stock Systems Operation Maintenance Contractor. Our vehicles are 100 meters long. We've got fully automated platform edge doors that will make things more reliable. We're designing the interiors in such a way that as the growth occurs, it gives us opportunities to reconfigure the interior of the trains to provide more capacity. So there's a number of tools that are available to us to be able to match our available capacity with our ridership.
Okay, thank you. Designated waiting areas for those of us who are taking transit in the evenings or in times when it's not very busy. Designated waiting areas are a welcome amenity. Can you talk about the provisions for designated waiting areas, whether or not there'll be payphones, passenger assistance on the platform? What will our experience be like in that regard?
I can take that one, Michael. Sorry. Yes, we have designated waiting areas, so there'll be seating, there'll be a higher level of lighting, there'll be passenger assistance intercoms, and we are also looking at other amenities like a charging station, and we are not having public phones, but you are able to communicate through the passenger assistance intercom with the station manager.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask, where would they be located on the platforms? At the middle, the end, or?
Well, they're located in different locations. They're generally just adjacent to the elevators.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. And Celia, while you're up, there are several questions about retail space. And does the planning so far, is there anything that you can say about retail space? Will there be indoor retail space at these 3 stations? Outdoor, are arrangements made? Some people are asking about McDonald's or other food type locations. There were a number of questions. What can be said so far about the retail space at these 3 stations?
Well, for Exhibition Station, it has a large overhead concourse, and that's being planned with some significant retail, and it's being planned really as an amenity for the public as well as transit users. And for the inline stations that we have currently, we've planned the stations with sort of a minimal provision for retail. The primary use is the transit use, and we're providing really sort of minimal retail, although there is the possibility of development in the future. There is some provision for that.
Okay, thank you. And will there be a point in this process, as Malcolm had mentioned earlier, as the ongoing consultations go forward, where you'll provide more details, or will that be post-construction? More details, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely, it's a continuous feedback loop. We're developing reference concept designs that we'll be sharing over the course of the next little while. But most importantly, when we get our South Civil's proponent on board, they're going to start their design, and they're going to have to meet the requirements of our project-specific output specifications, which are the rules that they must deliver the project by. And as those designs are developed, we'll be sharing that continuously with the community, because we'll be excited to see it also.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to press you on that. We're moving through the written questions pretty quickly. So in a second, we're going to go over to Kelly Thornton in the Zoom room. I believe that she has one or more questioners. And so we'll head over there in a second. But before we do, bicycle parking. There's a question about, are you making provisions for people who may ride their bicycles to the stations to park their bicycles indoor or outdoor, or any other kind of arrangement for people who use their bicycles to get to the stations?
So we are very actively pursuing opportunities for the inclusion of active bike storage at some of our stations that have higher ridership. Some stations like Queen and Osgood won't have those sort of provisions built into them. But Celia, maybe you could elaborate a little further on some of our thoughts on that.
Yeah, we're doing more with to integrate bicycle infrastructure really as part of really treating it as an intermodal connection that's very important to the design of the stations. So at both King Bathurst and Queen and Spadina, and a very significant allowance at Exhibition Station, we're providing secured long-term bicycle parking. So you'll be able to park your bicycle inside in a facility. We also have extensive sheltered exterior parking. And it's really been a priority in the planning of the stations.
Okay, thank you for that. There are also questions about the elevators, and in particular with Exhibition, taking that one, and perhaps if you want to elaborate on the other two. But one of the questions is, how many elevators will there be at Exhibition Stadium? Or Exhibition Station, sorry.
I'll start this one.
Yes.
We have a minimum of 2 elevators connecting the street to the platform. So at Exhibition Station, we have, I think I'm getting it right, we have 14 elevators. So there's always a redundant path. If an elevator is out of service, there's always an adjacent route that permits access. And we've tried to provide twin elevators in all of our entrances where space constraints. Some of our entrances are constrained by heritage properties or other site constraints, but that's the standard, is to provide a minimum of 2 accessible paths. And
Okay.
and our elevators are really being designed as sort of larger capacity elevators, so they're larger than the elevators you might have that exist in the system.
Celia, maybe you can outline the provisions for walk-through elevators at some of our locations where space is available.
That's right. Actually, it's a requirement throughout the project that we have flow-through elevators, so that you enter on one side of the elevator and then forward motion, you exit on the other side. So that's been one of the planning principles, and that's for handling a large capacity of people, but it's also to make for ease of use for everyone.
There's also a question, Celia, about the escalators. Can you talk a bit about the escalators? And one of the things that I noticed, and it may have just been an optical illusion, but when you were showing the design drawings of the stairs, and I think about going down into the Osgood station from the street on a snowy day, those seem like pretty steep stairs going down. On the drawing, it looked like they were much less steep than we may be used to for the existing subway. Is there a difference in the incline of the stairs, and then if you could talk a bit about the escalators too, please?
Yeah, it's an important standard, and it's consistent with the Metrolinx standards. So we have it at 30 degrees. So it is a slightly shallower stair, and that the angle of the stairs matches the angle of the escalators, and that's sort of an established standard that's important for consistency. Also, people learn how to ride an escalator, and they have certain expectations, and so it's very important that we keep those standards the same.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for that.
Joseph,
yeah.
Maybe we could just ask Celia to talk about the waterfall design of the escalators where we can, to allow people the continuous movement to the platform level.
Yes, we have different station types depending on the configuration or the site and what's possible. But we have a couple of locations where it's possible to have a large cut and cover station, and we're proposing the cascading design because that allows you to see your path. You can see your next destination as you're traveling down into the station, and it's also helps with intuitive wayfinding, that when you're traveling, when you're arriving on the platform and traveling up, it seeing the daylight and seeing the entrance is a powerful wayfinding tool, that and it's an intuitive one, that you know which way to go to get out and get up to the sleep.
Okay, thank you. And just while we're on wayfinding, because you mentioned it, I'm going to sneak in one question on wayfinding that was asked by a questioner. And then we're going over to Kelly in the Zoom room. But the question is, in terms of the signage, what kind of font? What are you designing the signage for legibility for people with all kinds of site capabilities?
Well, this one maybe I'll defer back to Malcolm or Richard, but again, this is very important for consistency. So we're using the Metrolinx standard, and there will be mixed case lettering, which is the most legible. But yes, it's to the Metrolinx standard.
Okay. So, Malcolm and Richard, if a person is right now taking Go, they are familiar with the signage, and if they can find their way using that signage and read that signage, that's what they'll be expecting on the Ontario line?
It will be similar. The signage packages tend to evolve with time, and improve, and we're becoming more and more inclusive and recognizing the benefits of some larger fonts, some differential contrast, all those things. And those things are all being applied as part of the sign development wayfinding package. We're also working quite closely with the TTC to make sure that we have a level of coordination, so that somebody coming from line 1 at Queen Station doesn't have an abrupt change in environment coming into the Ontario line.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've spent about a half hour on written questions, and we do have the Zoom room. And Kelly Thornton, can you hear us there? You know, we may well have lost Kelly. We had contact with her earlier. I'm hoping that Kelly, if she has some questioners there, might be able to hear us.
Joseph, I can hear you.
Hi there.
You can hear me.
Excellent.
Ah, okay, great.
We can hear you now. Okay, Kelly,
Okay,
over
that's
to
great.
you.
Woo, that's good. Hello, everyone. We have 6 or 7 people with us here in the Zoom room. So far, just one person has 3 questions, though, and that person is Les. So, Les, if you'd like to ask your questions, you are free to unmute yourself now.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, I have several questions. How will you move commuters quickly from Exhibition Place to Ontario Place? Are you implementing a higher order of transit for the last mile between Ontario Line and Ontario Place? And would a higher order of transit be needed for all LRT and rail plans, right-of-way plans? Because I was wondering if there's any expansion plans for future Ontario Line expansion into South Etobicoke. If not, will there be some LRT or right-of-way considerations for rapid access to the Ontario Line exhibition stop for South Etobicoke communities? Because right now they have to go up to the Bloor line in order to go back downtown again. So if you get some sort of a consideration for that, that would make it a lot quicker for everybody.
Thank you, Les. So that's a 3-parter. So how about we start with the first question, maybe Malcolm and Celia, which is, how will you move commuters quickly from Exhibition Place to Ontario, Exhibition Station to Ontario Place?
Yeah, so we did discuss that earlier. So we do have a very active work program to look at moving people from Exhibition Station to Ontario Place, and the volumes of people that we're expecting. And we're doing our business case, evaluating 5 or 6 different proposals for that connection. When that work's drawing to a close, we'll naturally discuss that publicly. We also are working quite closely with the Exhibition Place Board of Governors and the City of Toronto with this body of work, as well as Infrastructure Ontario, who's involved at Ontario Place. So that's a very active body of work, Les, and as we draw closer to conclusions, we'll be happy to share that with you. Kelly, you wanted to ask the next question?
Yeah, the next one, how about and I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe Les, you'd like some clarification. So Les was asking, what needs to happen to achieve a rapid order of transit for the last mile between the Ontario Line and Ontario Place? Would higher order or transit be needed for all LRT or right-of-way plans? And will we consider an extension through to South Etobicoke, so South Etobicoke folks can hook up to the Ontario Line also seamlessly?
Okay, so recapping, the Ontario Place connection is under design and development right now, evaluation. The extension to the west, that is incorporated into our current plans. We haven't identified where we're going west. The city also has the Western Waterfront LRT project, which is under the TTC's realm, and all of those are not being precluded by the current design for the Ontario Line and the current terminal station that we have at Exhibition. Kelly?
Sure. Okay, thanks. So Les, how's that? Do you have any follow-up questions before we move on?
No, that's fine. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, so next up we have Seth. So Seth, you're free to unmute yourself now.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone. So I was the person who had asked in the website the question regarding the diagram on slide 8 that shows sort of a future build out of exhibition station. And I would like to ask sort of a follow-up question to the answer that Malcolm had previously provided regarding the streetcar connection. I understand that you're saying that you're working closely with the TTC so that your plans don't impede anything that they want to do with the Waterfront West streetcar. And I was just wondering how, or if you're able to elaborate at all on that, because the diagram in slide 8 seems to tell sort of a different story. It implies, in some ways, a very precluding element of the design, to any TTC extension, which is that the south entrance of Exhibition GO Station / Ontario Line seems to have this sort of forecourt under the Gardiner directly in front of the end of the streetcar loop. So, I think it would be nice to understand in more detail exactly how you are, doing what you say you're doing when it comes to accommodating the TTC's design. If you're aware of at all what they're doing, it would be nice to have that included in the meeting materials going forward, just because this current graphic here makes it very difficult to understand how that will, that level of cooperation will be achieved.
Hi, Seth. It's Malcolm. Yeah, so what's shown on slide 8 is the current streetcar loop that exists under the Gardiner and just to the south side of the Gardiner. Again, I can guarantee you we're working very actively with the TTC and their service planning and design group to make sure that accommodations are made for that future extension to Dufferin and being able to complete that loop. So that would entail TTC considering a stop immediately in front of the new Ontario Line exhibition station. So other than telling you that we are very actively working with the TTC, we can when TTC is ready to start sharing their design development. Start to overlay in dotted lines on a slide like slide 8 where those lines might be, and we'll reach out to them and see whether they're in a position to be able to share that information.
Okay. Yeah, just as a follow-up, I think the reason why I'm asking this and sort of just more motivation behind it is, given the number of really high attendance events at Exhibition Place, like the CNE or like games at the stadium right there, it seems quite underbuilt to have a streetcar stop just on the street in the forecourt in front of the GO and Ontario Line station that would require people to walk directly across the streetcar tracks to then reach the GO and Ontario Line trains. And so that's what has me concerned, that the way it is depicted right now is not sort of anticipating those high crowd volumes and could pose a problem in the future for the TTC's design. So it would just be nice to see a better coordination between Metrolinx and the TTC on that, with respect to that south entrance and how you're expecting to bridge, for lack of a better word, the streetcar tracks. Thanks.
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, Seth.
That is a very good point that you brought up, and it is the challenge that we're dealing with the TTC on how we can they can run the streetcars through this area while still maintaining pedestrian flows. So you did cite a very challenging part of the design, and but we are working quite closely with the TTC to resolve that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Seth. Next up, we have Matt. And Matt, you're ready to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you for the time, and appreciate you guys having this the public forum to discuss this. I wanted to follow up on a couple of questions that were asked on the forum, but not addressed. and it was specific, I think, to the Queen and Spadina section, and looking at what construction impacts there would be and what was proposed in terms of potential condominiums going on top of some of the sites that are planning to be acquired. I think some of the renderings look like there were fairly material-sized buildings going up. And there's, I think, a question that was on the site asking about how, Queen Street is preserved as, a relatively small or shorter storied area. And if, these new condos are proposed, what that does to the precedent. So can you talk a little bit about around, the one rendering view that showed a condo building going up in that area, and what, if any, plans are so far in that space?
So perhaps first off, I'll ask Richard to touch base on. Actually, I'll answer the TOC question first, and then Richard, maybe you could just talk about construction afterwards. So Matt, what we're delivering is the transit infrastructure as part of our project. Where we have entrances that can be incorporated into a transit-oriented community, our colleagues at Infrastructure Ontario are managing that in collaboration with the City of Toronto. So announcements are being made across the alignment by Infrastructure Ontario about those plans. And, it's a natural extension that around transit stations, higher order subway transit stations, that a level of intensification might occur. But that is part of like I said, a transit-oriented community program that follows after we're done building the transit system. Richard, maybe you could just talk about the construction impacts in the area?
Sure, happy to. So in terms of the construction, there's two sites at Queen and Spadina, which are on the southwest and northeast corners, and that's done quite thoughtfully, because essentially the station straddles Spadina Avenue and allows for good connections with the streetcars both on Queen and Spadina. Now those head houses basically in their early stages are essentially keyhole shafts that descend from that footprint straight down into the bedrock, and then they drive across and join onto the station, which is then mined out in the rock underneath the intersection of Queen and Spadina. So we're very deliberately looking to minimize the impact at the surface and do all this work within a mined sequential excavation method, SEM. And all the materials and everything and spoil will be brought out through those shafts, and the materials brought in through the shafts to build the station in that cavern. At this particular intersection, we anticipate having some lane closures here to allow for the loading and unloading of the trucks that will service these sites. But there's no closure of this intersection or the streets in this area.
Thank you for that. I think the bigger question is around if there are any zoning changes that are being proposed, and if there are any major new constructions that are being anticipated outside of the stations themselves, and how we get that as part of the same conversation and dialogue. And it sounds like there are some other bodies that may need to be involved in that, but I think it's important to make sure that we have that as part of the conversation as well and get some clarity there.
You're actually spot on with that. There is another group that will discuss that outside of the transit forum, and it will include the City of Toronto. Infrastructure Ontario has created an engageio.ca site where some information is available and how their consultation is rolled out. So I maybe suggest that you go there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And on the topic of transit-oriented communities, Les has another question. But before we get to Les, I just wanted to make a note, something that Matt said. For those watching, if you posted a question on the website and we didn't get to it during the first half of the Q&A, rest assured that answers will be posted. And if there's some urgency to the information that you want to receive, please reach out directly to the team. And they can get back to you. Give them a call or schedule a meeting, or just send an email directly, and you can get your answers that way as well. So moving on, back to Les. You're free to unmute yourself, Les.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay. Would any expansion east to west of the Ontario line automatically involve a transit-oriented communities destination? This is just a follow-up on Matt's question. And I also have a question about transit corridor lands. So if any of those stations in the east end, or the west end, pardon me, if they are close to existing structures, like whether they're low rise or high rise, how will that impact them in future changes to their structure or anything else? Because transit corridor lands, you have to get permission for Metrolinx to do any future development on the site. If you're within 30 meters of the tracks.
Thanks, Les.
So Les, I can help you with that one. It's Malcolm. So the transit corridor lands are a designation that's in place during the construction of the project. So it's not anticipated that it's going to be a lifelong designation. It's just to make sure that while we're building the transit, that we have the accessibility and the ability to be able to do things in an effective, timely fashion, especially when we have a project company that is working quite closely with us. So, and you also asked about intensification. Once again, the intensification rests solely on lands that we procure as part of the transit program, and that is a program that's being administered and implemented by Infrastructure Ontario. So, and I'll say it's engageio.ca. That's one of the means of getting updated on that program. Does that help, Les?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Les. Just last call for anyone in the Zoom room here before we go back to Joseph. Any questions? Nope, doesn't look like it. Okay, back to you, Joseph. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much. And I am sorry about missing those questions about the condos on top of the stations and the transit-oriented communities at the beginning. As I was following the questions, clearly the people who were on this call had upvoted those, and I missed them because they went from the bottom to the top of the list while we were going through. So I'm glad that you were able to get those asked. And as Malcolm has said, engageio.ca for Engage Infrastructure Ontario, they have started a series of consultations, community meetings over on that site dealing with the transit-oriented communities. So you'll be able to get your information there, and I really wasn't trying to duck that. So to those people who offered some comments, your notes have been taken, and hopefully you have gotten your answers. Now, if there are any other questions that we didn't answer tonight that are on the site, you should know that Metrolinx goes through these questions, and they don't answer every single question. Sometimes they group questions that have the same answer, but they will review that. And if we didn't get to your question in the written question time tonight, check the site in coming days. Also, check the site because there will be a recording of tonight's meeting, and you'll be able to see tonight's meeting again and check back. And as I said, you can also see the next 3 meetings that are coming up in this series for the Ontario line. And they will be scheduled later in September, and you can register there. You'll also find contact points for the people on this team. So I hope that people found the information useful. I hope that we covered all of the topics that were of importance to you. And I want to thank you all for participating. Thank you to the Metrolinx people, and thank you to you especially, the people, the participants who came out and made this a meaningful meeting. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you at the next one. In the meantime, stay safe.